Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products. Thanks for joining us today on Dairy News and Views from the ISU Dairy Team. I'm Jen Bentley, Northeast Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and today I'm here with my Extension Dairy Team colleagues, Fred Hall, Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and Dr. Gail Carpenter, our Associate Professor and State Extension Dairy Specialist, as we discuss today's topic with our guest. So welcome back, Fred and Gail.
Glad to be here.
Always a happy time to be here.
Yeah, and so today we're happy to have on our podcast with us Victor Gomez. He also is an assistant professor and state extension dairy field specialist for Kansas State University. And so we want to welcome him to our podcast. And Victor, before we get started talking about our topic, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Hello, everybody. First, thanks for having me here. It's always fun to discuss with this group and collaborate with the folks at Iowa State University. So I'm originally from Colombia. I did my DVM down there. But then when I finished, I decided I wanted to do grad school. So I moved even southern to Brazil to do master's and PhD in animal reproduction. And during the PhD, I came to University of Wisconsin to do 2 years as part of my PhD. Later on, I stayed 2 years there as postdoc. Currently, I've been for 3 years at Kansas State University, where I focus on dairy cattle reproduction, and I do training with dairy producers, dairy technicians in the state of Kansas and out of state. A lot of those will be in Spanish, and so just training on repro techniques and what is new and what can we do to have better fertility in the herd.
Thanks, Victor. And, you were part of our field days here that we had this last couple of weeks, and you traveled to Iowa with us. But if our listeners know or have been following our extension dairy team, we've focused a lot on heifers this year, as we've kind of targeted our educational focus around dairy heifers, whether that be growth, economics, reproduction. And so this March and April, we decided that we wanted to get on some farms, get in front of producers and have some great discussions. And so we had 3 locations in Iowa, and then Gail and I traveled to Kansas and went to 2 of Victor's locations and provided some in-person discussions around colostrum management, heifer growth benchmarking, economics, and reproduction strategies, and best management practices for AI. So I guess it's been a great experience, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about today, is just a little bit about our experience there, as well as some of those takeaways from both of those. So who wants to kick it off?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. And, I'm a hands-on kind of a guy, and we had a really neat hands-on portion to these programs. For the folks who weren't at the program, Victor, tell us what you did or what you demonstrated.
Yeah, definitely. So we talk a little bit about reproduction, and I always like to tell people that we have to measure reproduction. So we talk a little bit about service rate and conception rate and the difference between those two, and how we get to the 21-day birth rate. We discuss a lot about repro programs for heifers, but then we spend a lot of time, as Fred was saying, talking about semen handling. And so it's a very interesting activity in which people can really see what happens when we prep the semen the correct way, and when we prep the semen, say, in cold water, or we even prep the semen the right way, but then we don't keep the warmer or the AI gun warm, and things like that. So they can really see how the sperm is affected by temperature. And when you can decide whether you are going to use a good sperm to breed your cows versus not so good sperm, and that depends on how you are prepping the semen, I think people realize we can do a better job. And it's not that we are not we don't know what to do. Most people know what to do, but they will do a job and get pregnancies from there. So maybe we start cutting some of the corners and taking less care of some of the details. So I don't know, we spent maybe like 2 hours on that lab, uh, just prepping semen, comparing conventional versus sex semen, how it's affected by temperature, by preparation. We also have some repro tracks. So we also, on top of the semen handling part, we also talk about the breeding technique. And so for some folks that were learning, we provided some tips on what to do when they are learning, what are the main challenges and how to overcome those. And for some that are already trained, we also provide some tips on what to do to do a better breeding technique. So I think that kind of is a good overview of the practice that we did with you guys there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there was some aha moments of, kind of getting into the, kind of get into your own routine, right? And then you realize maybe that's not the way I should be handling it. And now with your visuals, you kind of saw the effects of some of those handling techniques. So I think it was kind of some good aha moments for people.
Yeah, procedural drift is a real thing, and we see that in a lot of different areas on the dairy, whether that's calves or milking procedures or whatever it is. But semen handling is definitely one of those things where, you're trained on it, and then how many check-ins or retrainings do you do with folks, and how easy is it to kind of start cutting corners without even realizing that you're doing that, right? And so, yeah, thinking of all the different ways semen are pretty fragile. So thinking of all the different ways things can go wrong and what we can do to kind of mitigate that, making sure that we're maximizing our investment on those genetics. I think that was really eye-opening for me.
Some of the facts and figures as far as getting pregnancies, and I think back to when I was breeding cows every day, as long as I got some pregnancies, I'm sure procedural drift was big in my world. If you've got pig chores and feedlot chores, plus you're trying to run the combine, and yeah, it didn't always work. But we got a few calves pregnant every month, and that's all we really worried about. But when you put dollars and cents information to you there, Victor, that made it come across perfectly.
Yeah, definitely, Fred. I think that was something very unique for the field days that we did in Iowa and also here in Kansas is that we try to tie up everything together, right? Put the economics on these. And I mean, I've seen it in different places in which we have to feed the cows, we have to handle the manure, we have to get the cow's milk. And so those are our priorities. And then repro, it's kind of secondary. And I do understand the the complexities of operating a dairy farm and then on top add the reproduction. But I think something we try to get the message across is that reproduction is going to impact how much manure you are handling, how much feeding you are doing, how much milk you are getting from your farm. So those are impressive numbers when you start adding those, and those are based on assumptions, but they are still impressive numbers. So
Yeah, and I guess, as part of my presentations throughout all the field days, we covered quite a bit on colostrum management and cleanliness. And again, kind of some of the similar concepts, right? Of just, procedural drift as we talk about, we know these things are important, but then all of a sudden we have to go back and review and be like, oh yeah, I need to start measuring the quality of my colostrum so that I know I'm getting adequate colostrum into those calves, because those have big effects long term if we look at overall growth of those animals. If we talk about cleanliness of our milk, we know that can have a significant effect on just the survivability of our calves, right? So making sure we're providing clean quality colostrum to those calves. I thought a lot of that great discussion on how people are measuring quality, how much they're giving their calves, and talking about timeliness. I think that those were all great discussions from all the producers. Everybody does it a little bit different. But I think if we all kind of follow those 5 cues as we go through that, then we'll have a successful colostrum management program.
Yeah, I think that ties in with my topic as well as Victor's topic too, and all of the things we talked about, because you don't ever want your heifers to have to catch up from a bad start, right? You never want them. I talked about growth and, getting that right age at first calving for your herd. And Victor talked about getting these heifers to settle. Yeah, I think that idea of colostrum quality, it ties in with all of our other topics too, whether that's, me talking about growth and development and that getting that right age at first calving, or Victor's discussion about getting those heifers actually bred and pregnant. Like, you never want your heifers to have to catch up from a bad start, right? And so it makes getting everything else dialed in is so much easier if you've set yourself up for success from day one. And so that's why we really wanted to emphasize, as we've been talking about, making sure you get that day one management really, really dialed in, and making sure you're doing everything in your power to be able to set those heifers up for success.
At the Sioux Center program, we had a variety of questions come in. What were some of the key questions that you had from producers across the state that were common?
So on the heifer reproduction is like what type of reaper programs are out there, and what should I be doing? Some folks are doing breeding to estrus and then doing a time AI, or some are doing time AI and then breeding to estrus. So some questions about what are some of those of the difference of doing one program or the other one, and if it's within one program, how that program should look like. And the key message is that there is not a single recipe to be successful in reproduction. You probably need to adopt the program that you can do the best, and that is gonna give you the best result. So, for example, if you think in cows, if and you are gonna commit to doing a double upsync, those are 7 shots, 20 some days. If you cannot comply to that, then you probably shouldn't run that program on your herd. There are other programs that may be better for you. Uh, so some of those were some of the general questions. Something else that we also got a lot uh, was the 21 preg rate farms are looking into getting right now. And so 2012, 2010, people were looking at the 20%, 21-day preg rate. That was kind of like a goal for herds. And nowadays, people are looking to the upper 20s or even 30s. So a 28% preg rate or a 30% preg rate will be very common goals for dairy hares nowadays. And again, those depends on uh, if you are breeding your eligible animals timely, and how successful are you in getting those pregnant once you breed them.
Yeah, but that also, I mean, I don't know if this was a question that we got, but definitely some discussion that we've had is kind of finding that you want to breed your eligible animals, but when it comes to heifers, you want to make sure that those eligible animals are also the right size, right? And we really want to make sure that they've hit, those benchmarks for body weight, and make sure whatever that is for our herd based on our mature body weight, we want to make sure that they've hit that before we start breeding them. And so it maybe sounded like I was talking out two sides of my mouth sometimes, because I'd say, kind of like Victor's saying right there, we want to make sure that we're complying and getting these eligible animals bred, but I'm also telling you maybe it's a good idea to wait on some of your heifers too. So that middle ground kind of looks different for different herds, but I would say, if you're in the short term, like if you're out there today and you've decided 800 pounds is kind of where I want to breed my heifers at, go out there today and say, I'm gonna, if that heifer's too small, I'm not gonna breed her until she's hit the size that I want. But in the long term, if we're finding that our heifers aren't hitting our ideal body weight, some of them are hitting it at younger ages than others, and we have a lot of variation in where our heifers are hitting their ideal size. In the medium and long term, we really need to be talking with our nutritionists, our veterinarians, extension folks, our on-farm consultants that are there to help us say, how can I reduce some of this variation and growth in my heifers if some of my heifers are hitting their benchmarks really quickly and some aren't. So it's definitely not something that we can necessarily answer all the questions to today for every herd. But hopefully start working on making a path forward.
Right. And so let me clarify something because when I talk about getting animals pregnant, the two key words there are eligible and timely. And that doesn't mean it needs to be sooner or younger. We want to be, we want to have to call an animal eligible based on the correct parameters. And that's where what you are saying, Gail, makes a lot of sense is that we don't want to call a heifer that is 10 months old or 11 or maybe even 12, depending on how how much she weighs and the frame of the heifer, things like that. So folks need to pay a lot of attention on what their eligible animals are. And once they are eligible, we want to get them pregnant timely.
Yeah.
But it's very important that people recognize those differences. It's not that we're not saying here, get your animals pregnant younger, get them pregnant
Yeah.
at the right time. That's what we need
Yeah.
to do, and probably diminish the variation. I think you presented a really nice slide where people say, okay, we're at the right weight. These are our eligible heifers, but then they took there were some heifers getting pregnant right away, and there were other heifers getting pregnant 7 months later. And so that variation is also going to affect a lot the profitability of the farm. So there's where timely, efficient getting those animals pregnant comes and play a big role.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we could spend a lot of time. The word eligible is a great word, but it can mean so many things to different people. And I guess what we're encouraging folks to do is not just say, hey, you know what, they've hit the right breeding age, now they're eligible. But also incorporate that animal's growth into that decision as well when deciding if animals are eligible. Unfortunately, though, your herd management software is only going to look at age, whatever you set that voluntary waiting period as, to determine what animals are eligible when it's calculating insemination rate and pregnancy rate. So that might I don't know, if you're a person who's kind of competitive with numbers and trying to get your numbers up, I would encourage, if you're that kind of person, I would encourage you to maybe be willing to relax your standards on that preg rate a little bit if it means breeding some heifers a little bit later than others because they are not quite to that right body size yet.
Well, but I think it comes to your point that we're trying to make as well, that so if you are not getting to your target weight and your target frame, it's not just about waiting for those animals, but evaluating, do I have a problem in the hair, or do I have to be feeding the animals differently? So, or do I need to move my average age later? So yeah, be very proactive in that sense. And of course, once you determine what your eligible animal looks like, you still are going to have some outliers that you'll have to wait, and they probably will move your numbers down a little bit, and that's fine because then you're going to get all the benefits of greater milk production, better fertility later in life, and things like that. Uh, but the whole point, Gail, I think it's just what you just mentioned. Is like, what are our eligible animals, right? That's the whole idea of this initiative that you guys put together on raising the better heifers or the best heifers, and to measure and see what the adult weight is, what should be our correct age to breed those heifers and things like that. Why don't you expand a little bit on that idea, Gail?
Yeah, this whole project, the field days that we had in Iowa and the ones we had in Kansas, and a lot of the data that we've been collecting around the state of Iowa has all come from the North Central Extension Risk Management Education, a grant that we received last year, looking, and that's why Jen mentioned that we've been focusing a lot on heifers over the past few months, and a lot of that is because we received funding to kind of help dairy producers mitigate some of the risk that comes with raising heifers. We're interested in this topic because heifers are a major cost when it comes to a dairy's the cost of production. And so we've been going around the state. We took a break over the winter, but as the weather's warming up, if you're interested in having us come out, you can certainly give us a call, and willing to come to your farm for this. But what we've done is kind of go on farms and just weigh a bunch of animals. So we've really targeted trying to get animals' birth weights, trying to get weaning weights, trying to get breeding age weights, and then see where they're at around that first calving. But importantly, we've been also collecting mature body weights for our herds as well. So, and that's why I say, when I talk about these benchmarks, I really talk about them as a percent of mature body weight. Because even within a breed, and we've seen this, right? We've gone on some farms that really like big Holsteins, and so we're going to see some pretty big animals there. And we've been on other farms that have a more moderate target size for their Holsteins. So using a standard growth chart for a breed, we've definitely seen this firsthand, that it's not necessarily going to give you good recommendations, right? So we've gone on farm with scales and weigh tapes and tried to collect that information for a farm, right? And say, this is the mature body weight of your herd. We're going to measure those 3rd and 4th lactation cows that are in mid lactation, get kind of an average for mature body weight for your herd, and seeing if you're hitting those targets at breeding age and at first calving. So that's definitely been it's been a lot of fun going around and seeing, getting to visit with our different dairy producers around the state. But it's also been, at least for me, it's been very eye-opening. You read the textbooks and you read the articles and you see, you hear about what you should be doing, and this is, if you're doing it right, this is going to be the benefits. And we've definitely seen a lot of that in person as well. So that's been and yeah, all of these activities were funded by the same grant, and so that's what allowed us to go down to Kansas, and that's also what allowed Victor to come up here and visit us.
Thanks for that recap, Gail. And I think as we're kind of recapping our podcast here and kind of ending or concluding our recording here, maybe each of us could go around and just give some key takeaways and maybe your favorite part of our heifer meetings. So maybe Victor, how about we start with you, since you had to travel to Iowa first? How about we start with you?
Yeah, definitely. So some of the key points that I think people should be considering, it's in terms of semen handling, at least, it's to decrease the time that semen straws get exposed to unnecessary temperature changes. And what I mean by that is decrease the time between your semen tank to your water towing unit, from there to your AI gun, and from there to the AI warmer, and from there to the cow. That, if you extend those times, fertility research shows that fertility is going to decrease. And then the other thing, I'm sure you can find a lot of the information that we shared last on those field days online and with us as well, is like, take one of those key messages. Don't try to do all of them at the same time. Take one of them and work on it, and see what difference that's gonna make on your herd. And then you keep adding more and more as you succeed on each of those. And again, be efficient once you define what the correct age or weight or frame for your heifers is going to be. Be efficient on getting those animals pregnant. If I would love to help anybody out there that will want to discuss on how a program to do that efficiently would look like, or you can, as always, work with your veterinarians there.
Thanks, Victor. And we hope the next time you come back to Iowa that we give you better weather, right? So we had 70-degree weather all of February, and then March came and it became 20, 30-degree weather. So
Well, it was
we
good to
made it.
show how sensitive the seeming throws are.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were out in that barn and definitely could not keep things mobile very long, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll go next and just, as we talk about early life care, just again, a reminder just to review your 5Qs, frequently. So it doesn't have to be every day that you have to review it, but if you're assessing your colostrum management program, taking a look at quality, making sure that we're getting high quality colostrum into those calves as soon as we can, because we know that there's so much benefit to increase IgGs as we talk about, upping those standards. We want to get up to 150 to 200 grams of IgGs, but we want to really push the level and, maybe get even closer to 300 grams of IgGs in that first 24 hours. So just taking into consideration that quality and quantity, finding tools that work for you that help you measure that. So however that looks for you, whether that's using a digital or analog bricks, colostrometer, whatever tool that you feel comfortable with and can get some protocols in place to start measuring it, taking a look at quickness, again, just, making sure that we're getting it into them as soon as possible. Squeaky clean, that's a new one that we've added here in the last few years. So making sure that we're providing clean quality colostrum so that those calves can actually absorb the colostrum that they're getting, absorb those IgGs, and making sure that we're not providing any bacteria into the gut right away, and we can keep those calves healthy. And then going back and just assessing it through quantifying passive transfer. So, whether you're working with your veterinarian to do that or an industry rep that can help you determine, are those calves actually absorbing the colostrum that we're giving them to assess your program. So those are some of the key takeaways that I would say with this program. And I would also say traveling to Kansas, we got to taste some ice cream from the Kansas State University club there. So I would say butter pecan. Was that right, Gail? Butter pecan is the one we sampled.
Butter brickle. Yeah, butter
brickle. That's right. I would recommend that. So those are my takeaways.
And I just might want to mention that they did not bring any samples home with them. So, the statement Gail made earlier is the one that sticks with me, is you can't make a heifer catch up from a bad start. I think that really puts a fine edge on it for me, that every step has the potential to cause a problem. So you really have to get that calf colostrum fed early. We have to make sure we got them on the right plane for weaning. We have to make sure they continue growing so they're, adequate size when we want to breed them, and then maintain that growth when they're coming into the pen for calving. And the economics of it are pretty strong. It's not as though it's just we want heifers that are big and look good. Those heifers make us money.
Yeah, and I think mine kind of ties in with what Fred just said, as well as Victor's comments. Our heifers after weaning and before calving, they might not be as high maintenance as our pre-weaning heifers are or lactating cows are, but they still need we can't just throw them out on the back 40 and forget about them. They are an investment in the future of your herd. They make the foundation for the future of your herd. So that while they may not need the same, they're not quite as high maintenance. You don't have to milk them. You don't have to, be as, you're not feeding them twice a day, milk replace or anything like that. So they don't necessarily require the same level of management as some of our other groups do, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. And so making sure that we're paying attention to their growth and development, as well as making sure that we're putting a little thought and care and intentionality into making sure that they're getting bred when they're eligible and in a timely way, like Victor said earlier. So, and I guess my favorite part too was also the ice cream. But every time I get to, born and raised in the Midwest. I've lived in a lot of states in the Midwest, including Kansas. I did my PhD at K-State. So I think one of my favorite things to do is get to road trip across the Midwest and see some of the small towns and stop and enjoy some of the local culture. So, Victor and I, we stopped at Country View, got some frozen yogurt. Like Jen said, we went and got some Call Hall ice cream while we were down there. Got to stop at the Wagon Wheel in Marysville. So I always love a good Midwest road trip.
Well, I think that concludes our recap. So we're going to conclude here today, and I appreciate everybody being on the call. And if anybody listening has any additional questions or wants some follow-up information, certainly reach out to us and we can provide some more information as we talk about raising our dairy best heifers. So thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to visiting with you on the next Dairy News and Views from ISU. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.